Good evening, everyone. Tonight's review is of a movie that it's been a long time coming for me to watch this and review it. Now, tonight's movie is The Innocents, and it came out in 1961. I've seen this movie now 3 times in my life. The first time I saw this film was when I was a little kid. I was probably, 12, 13. The first time I saw it, I remember being terrified. I remember all the hairs standing up on my body while watching this movie. In fact, even watching it again now, I had goosebumps completely on my legs and my arms watching certain scenes. This movie is one of the scariest movies of the early 1900s. It's mid 1900s, 1961, but I guess what I'm trying to say is one of the scariest classic movies, at least for my time frame, because I review movies from the 30s, from the 40s, the 50s, and I cut it off with the early 1960s. So tonight's review is of The Innocents, and it's also one of the most popular, one of the most well-known scary movies. In fact, a lot of people regard it as one of the best, if not the best, scary movie of all time. I would certainly have it in my top 10. And it came out in, as I said, 1961. It was, I believe, made in England. It was directed by Jack Clayton. I don't really know much about him. And I would classify this as a psychological horror film. Now, that means this movie is going to play on your mind, which means you're going to be left with questions. I certainly always learn more every time I watch this movie, especially since I watched it as a little kid. In fact, maybe I watched it when I was young Miles' age, but I think I was a little older than Miles. So this film stars Deborah Kerr, and I'll be honest, I haven't seen too many of her movies because, again, 1961, it's starting to push my film range, at least for movies that I review. It also has Megs Jenkins, who is she works as the head sort of maid or head. She's in charge of the house, basically, the estate in this film. And also Michael Redgrave, which is funny because he was in a movie that we've already reviewed. He was the ventriloquist in Dead. I can't even remember the name. I think Dead of Night was the name. He was the ventriloquist in that. And he's a little bit older in this. He doesn't have a very big role, so I won't go far into his character. And we also have young Martin Stevens, who plays Miles. Incredible child actor. He's definitely one of the best child actors I've ever seen throughout any decade. It's so hard to find good kid actors, really. It is. And Pamela Franklin plays Flora, his sister. 2 adorable kids who are just incredible child actors. And of course, Deborah Kerr was also just outstanding. In fact, she was nominated for an Oscar for her performance in this. I definitely would have given it to her because she just has an outstanding performance. She's always just stressed out of her mind, just acting out of her mind, honestly. In fact, I sort of compared her to Ingrid Bergman's character in Gaslight because she's just always so stressed, and that's a psychological thriller as well. So this movie, it's interesting because Truman Capote helped write the screenplay for this. I also have to note Freddie Francis because he was the director of photography, because this movie is one of the most beautifully filmed pictures I've seen. It reminded me sort of a Hitchcock movie or even an Orson Welles movie. Just the black and white. And I'm so happy that they decided to use black and white for this film. In fact, I think this was a 20th Century Fox movie. I don't think they were too happy it was in black and white, because later after this movie they would sort of make a policy, we're only going to make CinemaScope films in color. But this is just a beautiful black and white movie. In fact, I said to my dad, can you imagine if this movie was in color? It just would not be the same. Certainly wouldn't be as beautiful. And interestingly enough, Freddie Francis and Jack Clayton, the director, they did not want this to be like a Hammer horror film. Hammer horror pictures were the craze at the time. I think I've reviewed several Hammer horror pictures. This movie is art. Honestly, this movie is a perfect film. It would be a 4 stars out of 4 stars. This is up there with The Shining, because it's a horror movie, but it's a masterpiece at the same time. And it's based on a book called The Turn of the Screw, which came out in 1898. And there are several other movies not with the name The Innocents, however, with the name The Turn of the Screw. Now that we have all that out of the way, let's dive into the plot. That's what we're here for. So Deborah Kerr, she is going to an estate. She's called by the uncle of these kids to say, I want you to look over my niece and nephew. I want you to take care of them. I don't want to have anything to do with their lives, basically. I want you to go to this beautiful estate. This is in England in the 1800s, and I want you to basically bring them up. So she goes to this estate, and right away it's this beautiful light. It's a beautiful countryside. Everything's looking bright and good, and just an amazing setting. And everything, of course, is not what it seems. In fact, she's talking to the head of the house, Megs, Jenkins' character, and she kind of can tell something is not right, especially she seems afraid. And there's this story that we'll later learn that the kid's previous teacher or person who watches over them, she died. And the little girl, especially Flora, was crazy for her. And we'll get to that later. However, when she meets the kids, or she doesn't meet Miles right away because Miles is away at school. And Flora says, oh, but you'll get to see him soon. And she thinks, that's odd. He's away at school. There's no holiday time soon. However, eventually, Miles gets called back home. And it's because Miles has been using horrible language at school, and he's basically corrupting the minds of the other boys at his school. And she finds that odd because he seems like an innocent little boy. In fact, you'll right away know that everything's not right with him, because when she asks him questions, he just doesn't, he ignores her. And the way Miles talks, he talks like an adult. His vocabulary is very much like an adult. In fact, sometimes it's creepy because it seems like he's being too charming. It's almost like he's flirting, I would say. So not everything is right with these two little kids. They're always whispering to each other secrets. And eventually, Deborah Kerr, she sees basically an apparition, and it's of a man, and he's on a tower. And I want to start out by saying that the perspectives that we have of all the spirits in this movie are what always just frightened me so much, because she looks at the top of a tower and she sees a man from afar. Now, I don't know about you all, but when I see spirits or anything scary from afar, for some reason it's scarier when it's from afar than when it's right up close, because we can't really see what it is exactly. That's what I always thought about Michael Myers and the Halloween movies. When you can see Michael from far, it makes the hair on my arms just rise up right away. And later, she has another, at nighttime, she's playing hide and seek, of course, the classic hide and seek in a scary movie. And she sees this apparition of the same man. His face comes up close into the window, and this scene also gave me goosebumps. It always does. Every every spirit ghost scene in this movie always gives me goosebumps. So she learns eventually that this man is dead, the man she keeps seeing, because Megs Jenkins, she knows everything. She tells her the story that this man was a horrible man, very controlling, because the previous woman who was watching over the kids was madly in love with him. However, he was abusive to her. And she later learns that the two of them basically had no respect for the kids. They would say awful things to each other. And this is one of the things I never picked up when I was younger. In fact, the second time I watched it, I didn't pick up. But they would have sexual relations to the point where she would say, the kids are there, they're watching, because we hear the whispers later in the movie. And they would continue to do sexual acts together in the presence of the kids, because the kids would learn horrible language and they would see horrible things. These are little kids, and they would continue to do it in total sin, corrupting these innocent kids in their minds. Now, we learn that he died in an accident, and she's so depressed that her lover, that even though he was horrible, basically abusive to her, she's so depressed that she commits suicide in a lake. And I want to note the lake scene because eventually Deborah Kerr is with Flora at the lake, and she sees the apparition of the ghost, the woman who killed herself, from afar again. And this scene has stuck with me ever since I was a little kid, because this scene is just terrifying. Even yesterday when I rewatched this, even though I know it's coming, all the hair on my skin rises up on my legs and on my arms. It's just so scary seeing her. Now, we learn that she automatically knows these spirits. They're in this house, and she says, for some reason, these kids are not normal. She thinks that the kids are being possessed by the two spirits, because the kids know words that they shouldn't know. They're always whispering to each other. It's like the spirits are communicating to each other through the kids, through the innocents. They're possessed because they're innocent kids. They're easy to take over. And I was thinking, this is like one of the earlier films I can think of where there's possession. This is like all these films are sort of building up to the exorcism. Because you wouldn't get an exorcism movie without movies like this, like The Innocents. So she figures this out, and she thinks, I'm going to save these kids. I need this. She loves kids. She loves these kids. So she thinks, okay, if I can get these kids to admit that the spirits are dead and say their name, basically, to admit it, then the spirits will go away from their bodies and they will be normal little kids again. I don't want to give everything away. However, I do want to specifically talk about the final ending with Miles. So please come watch this review. Come watch this part if you haven't seen the film. But although I think everyone who watches this review has seen The Innocents. So this is crazy because I never realized in the previous two times I watched the film that Miles dies at the end. Because when he said, where is it? Where is it? And this little boy's acting is just scary good. And he looks up and he still doesn't see the spirit, and he just basically falls to the ground dying. and Deborah Kerr, she kisses him on the lips, and in fact they kiss on the lips previously in the movie. And I remember thinking this is a little disturbing watching when I was younger. Even I thought that, and apparently Fox was nervous about that scene too. But anyway, he dies, and now that I'm older and wiser, I realize that we're left wondering if was Deborah Kerr's character just totally insane, and that there were never spirits, only she's the only one seeing the spirits, because no one really truly admits to seeing the spirits except her. So she's the only one that we truly know is seeing them. Now, because the kids still can't see, so was she a mad woman? Did she kill Miles? Or was she always telling the truth, that these spirits were possessing these little kids, and that the final ending, Miles did die because that evil spirit of that man took Miles's life when he was cast out of him? So there's so much ambiguity in this movie that we don't know exactly what happened. So we're left with many questions. And this is what makes an incredible, great movie, especially scary. This is like The Shining. There are so many different interpretations of The Shining. There's so many, probably so many different interpretations of The Innocents. And now that I'm older and I can understand these things, it makes me realize that this movie is even better than I originally thought. Because like I said, this movie is by far 4 out of 4 stars. It just goes over that horror film genre. It's a masterpiece of a film. So I hope you all enjoyed this review. I can't get to every single little thing about The Innocents in a YouTube video, especially a frightening horror film, because this is a Halloweenfest, so I don't want to go too far deep into the history of this movie. There's a lot of good things to read about. Just go to Wikipedia and you'll learn all sorts of things about The Innocents. It was a success, I will say that. Deborah Kerr, I believe she thought that this was her greatest performance ever, and I agree with that. Even though I haven't seen many of her films, wow, that's the first time the candle went out during one of my spooky reviews, so it's kind of scary, guys. I think that means we need to end this review. Thanks for watching, everyone.